study session of the Aurora City Council for Monday, April 17th, 2023 is called to order. Would the clerk please read the roll?
Mayor Kaufman.
Here.
Councilmember Bergen.
Here.
Councilmember Coombs.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Gardner.
Here.
Councilmember Jurenski.
Here.
Councilmember Lawson.
Here.
Councilmember Marcano.
Present.
Councilmember Medina. Councilmember Medina. Councilmember Murillo.
Present. I think I heard Councilmember Medina say here.
Okay, great. Councilmember Sundberg.
Here.
And Councilmember Zavanek.
Here.
Thank you.
No mayor's update. Are there any issue updates? Seeing none, 1C resolution to create an in-house team dedicated to conducting abatements of unauthorized camps. So I'm going to just give you an update and then withdraw it. Essentially, I think it's just taking too much time before a notice, the 72-hour notice is given to these encampments, and then too much time after the 72 hours elapses to be able to abate these encampments. And so, met with Justice Prosser and her team, and it's about some additional resources. And so I'm looking at those additional resources along with some temporary fencing. My initial idea was to replicate what Colorado Springs does in terms of having an in-house team, but that's just going to take too long to stand up. So the issue is going to be plussing up the existing contractor, either with the existing contractor or looking at some additional resources. With that, I withdraw 1C consent calendar, item 2A to 2E. Is there any objection to moving the consent calendar item number 2A to 2E forward? Seeing no objection, item number 2A through 2E.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Didn't unmute fast enough. Can I pull 2D as in dog?
2B, I'm sorry, or 2D?
D.
D as in Delta, okay.
Yeah.
2D, Amendment 4 to the Intergovernmental Agreement for Services between Arapahoe County and the City of Aurora. A presentation
I
by
was just
staff.
going to ask a question. Do you want a presentation?
Go ahead with your question.
Okay, so I know we've done this for many, many, many years, and we have different amendments, and this is the fourth amendment. I think it's regarding Dove Valley, the Arapahoe County Urban Park. And I know they're paying us $176,000 to do the mowing, the irrigation, the trash service, and so forth. So I guess my question, if I don't know if Brooke is on here, but my question is, are we able to provide that service to an outside entity? I know I have had constituents call about parks not being mowed on time and so forth. I just want to make sure we have the resources.
Hi, Councilmember Bergen. This is Brooke Bell, the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space, for the record. I'm sorry, my camera is not working. With regard to your question,
God dang it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay. With regard to your question, I do believe we can provide the service. This is 1-year contract. We've, like you said, we've provided the service for 24 years. This may be the last year of the contract. They are in a renovation, so it will be a reduced level of service for them, but they're still paying us the same annual amount. And with regard to other maintenance, we are down 19% of our staff on the parks operations side.
Right.
But I still believe we can provide the service.
Okay.
And,
yeah, my concern was, since I knew we were down quite a bit in staffing, I just wanted to make sure that we could still provide the services to our own constituents. But it sounds like we can.
Yes, I do believe we can.
Okay.
Okay, thank
You say that we're behind and we're down in terms of staffing. Have you looked at contracts?
We do have a significant number of contracts, including mowing contracts we did last year. We'll continue to do that. And we also are working on, again, the same methodology, adding bonuses to pay. It's just a tough market right now, but we are making some progress. So yeah, it's just we'll continue to look at our.
Well, I'll have further
salaries.
discussions offline about that in contracting. Are there any other comments on 2D? Seeing none, then is there any objection for moving 2A through 2E forward? Seeing none, 2A through 2E will move forward. Items for the policy committee. Item number 3A, Joint Terrorism Task Force Memorandum of Understanding. Brief presentation by Sam McGee, Police Commander.
Hey, good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Chris Jewell. Sam is out of the country, so I'm going to fill in his stead. This is an MOU for the Joint Terrorism Task Force that we have an officer, actually an agent, selected to be assigned to that here about the next month and a half. And we've been in this MOU previously, but because of staffing pulled out in 2020, and we're looking to restaff that position with Randy Hansen. The goal is to prevent, deter, and investigate terrorist acts. It's primarily domestic terrorism, but also can seep into international. So in any case, Randy's already been through his top secret clearance and has been deputized federally, so he has law enforcement authority throughout the country should something that's pertinent to Aurora take him somewhere outside of Aurora. So with that, I'll entertain any questions. And also, I know Megan Platt's on the line if there's any questions with regard to the specifics of the MOU itself.
Questions of staff? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving 3A forward? Seeing none, 3A will move forward. Thanks, Chris. Item number 3B, 2023 Spring Supplemental. Jackie Inman, Budget Program Manager.
Hi, I'm Jackie. I think I turned my camera on. Yep, there I am. I'm from the budget office, and I have the spring supplemental here bringing to you. This ordinance covers 2 years. There are final adjustments for 2022 transactions that have already occurred and requests for the initial adjustments to the 2023 budget. For 2022, the good news is that all items in the general fund were either projected and so are therefore included in the 2023 budget plan, or were technical and had no impact to fund balance. There's one item in the general fund I'd like to note for 2022. Although a transfer to the risk fund to keep the fund balance healthy was projected, the amount of the transfer turned out to be $1.7 million more than expected, due to the year-end actuarial adjustment for costs incurred but not reported. I'm sure you all have heard of the IBNR. That's what I'm talking about here. So Greg will be going over this more in detail at the workshop on the 29th and sort of give you an outlook for the risk fund. But there's also more details on page 388 of this package if you're interested in reading more about that. For all other funds, most items were projected or reviewed by council at a committee or council meeting. There are also several technical items to appropriate grant funds or lapse capital budgets. I should note that although an overage was projected for the Development Review Fund, it was more than expected. And this is really a timing issue in that year-end purchase orders for contracted services impacted the budget. And of course, the risk fund expenditures were more than projection because of the transfer of the IBNR and the transfer from the general fund. And so that is really the highlights of 2022, which is, like I said, good news. Most of that we expected and planned for. For 2023, there are several technical items. Some are the result of operational realignments where we're moving budgets from one organization to another. Other technical items include appropriating grant funding, creating transfer budgets by using existing appropriation and then reappropriating funds that were not able to be spent in 2022 due to timing. One item in 2023 that sort of sticks out due to the size is the appropriation of both grant and city funds for the I-70 Piccadilly project. We did provide attachment E in the packet, which sort of reviews the project funding coming from all sources. Significant items to note in the general fund include ongoing requests to add 9.5 FTE and 7 variable hour positions in support of public safety. 6.5 FTE are in the police department, and the rest are all in human resources for public safety recruitment and background services. With that, there are representatives here tonight to help me answer any of your questions, but those are the highlights we wanted to review.
Questions of staff?
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
Hi, Jackie, thanks.
Hi.
Hi. When you mentioned the I-70 project, and I don't have it in front of me, but I know the costs, I think, almost doubled or maybe more from the original grant and the matching funds. So is that new amount budgeted in 2023?
I am going to let either Cindy Collip or Ellie Watson answer that question.
Good evening. I'm Ellie Watson with Public Works Department. The full amount of the kind of revised cost of the I-70 Piccadilly is reflected both in the 2022 and 2023 supplemental that's before you today.
But what is the total of that? Because it was considerable. So that you're saying that is now in the 2023 budget?
Yes, the remainder is in the 2023 budget with the supplemental. And I can have that project manager provide a kind of summary of that total current cost estimate and get that to you.
Yeah, I guess my only, maybe I need to clarify my question. So we are funded with, we are able to match it because now the amount is way higher from the original match. So we're good on proceeding with that?
Correct. Yes, we are fully funded.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there any objection to moving 3B forward? Although I don't think it requires an action item. I think this is for information only, am I correct?
No, I believe we need, the first thing
Okay,
that you
is there
said.
any objection to moving 3B forward? Seeing none, item number 3B will move forward. Item number 3C, 13th Avenue Multimodal Corridor Study Final Report. Tom Worker Braddock.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Is that screen being shared?
No, nothing shared yet.
Okay, how about now?
Yes.
Okay. So, thank you, Mayor. I'm Tom Worker Braddock, Senior Transportation Planner here at the city. I'm presenting the final report of the 13th Avenue Multimodal Corridor Study. The link to the full report is shared with you in the council commentary. The purpose of the study was to identify ways to make it easier, more comfortable and safer for people to travel along or across 13th Avenue, including for people walking or bicycling. I'll be discussing the study's background, providing a very brief corridor overview, sharing our public involvement strategy and what we've heard from the public, and the preferred alternative going forward. And again, this information is all presented in the final report. In 2018, the city participated in a Complete Streets Consortium, with other local cities and national experts and used 13th Avenue as a case study where participants brainstormed how to make the street more comfortable for people who walk or bike. We used the materials from that workshop to submit and receive a Dr. Cog tip grant for the study. The total study was $500,000, which included a $110,000 local match. The map that you see shows the study area. Generally goes from 12th and Yosemite on the west to the Highline Canal past Chambers on the east. The alignment connects the Highline Canal, the Tollgate Creek Trail, and the Wesley Creek Trail. On the east, using 12th Avenue, allows us to connect directly into Denver's planned bike network. There are 11 schools within a quarter mile of the corridor. Directly on 13th Avenue, there's 3 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and a high school. 13th Avenue parallels Colfax Avenue, and we see this as a primary way for people that need to get to destinations on Colfax Avenue, but may not want to walk or bike on Colfax Avenue. Here's 13th Avenue today. It's generally described as a 2-way, 2-lane road. There's on-street parking on both sides of the street, posted speed limits of 25 to 30 miles per hour. And there are bike lanes east of Sable, but there's no other bike lanes anywhere else in the corridor. From this picture on the left, you can see why people might be tempted to speed. When there's not much parking on the corridor, it presents a wide, flat perspective. That picture is directly next to St. Therese Pre-K through 8 school, and there's Kenton Elementary School to the left. On the right there, you can see the narrow sidewalks, less than 4 feet wide and with road curbs predominate on 13th Avenue. If there's more than one person walking, the others in the group either have to walk in the parking lane or around cars. The top map here shows both the speed limits along 13th Avenue, but also the 85th percentile speed, which is the speed 85% of drivers travel along or below. This is generally seen as a measure of how people actually travel. For 13th Avenue, this tells us that people are driving at nearly 10 miles per hour over the speed limit. This indicates that for those people, it's comfortable and feels normal to drive faster than the speed limit. The flip side is that for those speeding cars, making anyone walking or biking on the corridor feel less comfortable. We also looked at how parking was used on the corridor. We not only looked along 13th Avenue itself, but also 1 block north and 1 block south. Parking was examined at 3 different periods: weekday midday between 11 and 1, weekday early morning between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., and weekend late evening. In all time periods, less than half of parking was used along 13th Avenue. When talking about this with the public, several mentioned that folks have had cars hit on 13th Avenue, and they were afraid to park there because of speed. I want to focus on what we've heard from the public throughout the project. We had 3 rounds of reaching out to the public, and there were a mix of virtual meetings, interactive maps where people can make comments over several weeks, and in-person events. In the first round, most respondents said speeding vehicles, narrow sidewalks, and no safe space to ride a bike were why they felt unsafe traveling on 13th Avenue. When asked what would improve traveling, people responded with better crosswalks, wider sidewalks, separation between the road and sidewalk, and bike lanes separated from traffic. Most respondents said their preferred vision for 13th Avenue in the next 5 to 10 years was where cars still travel the corridor, but it feels like bicycling, walking, and transit on an equal footing with car travel. In the second round of public involvement, we presented alternatives to the current corridor. We first asked the public what their top priorities were. The top ranked priority was safe routes to school, followed by traffic calming and pedestrian comfort and safety. Maintaining all existing parking or keeping 13th Avenue as it is now ranked least important. We asked people what features they liked best of the 4 alternatives that were presented to them. Top responses were widened sidewalks and separated bike lanes. When we asked what features liked least, they chose bikes sharing the travel lanes with cars and keeping parking on both sides of the street. And in the third round of both in-person meetings and online engagement, we presented a preferred concept and gave the people a chance to provide inputs on large roll plots with the concept laid out. As part of the second round of public engagement, we held a family-friendly streets event in October 2021. This is also known as tactical urbanism. It's where we went out to a 2-block section of 13th Avenue right next to Kenton Elementary and St. Teresa Elementary, created wider sidewalks, bike lanes, separate bike lanes, and a shared use path using temporary materials, and invited the public to tell us what they thought about each segment. We had this on a Tuesday and had everything in place by the time parents started arriving to pick up their kids from school. We incentivized their participation. If people filled out a survey, they were to get a pumpkin. And if they filled out a survey at each of the different survey stations, they would get a ticket for an entree from the on-site food truck. Unsurprisingly, people liked wider sidewalks, preferred separated bike lanes over regular bike lanes, and liked the shared use path. To make sure people knew about this event, we hand-delivered flyers to all of the households, not only on the entirety of the 13th Avenue itself, but also on all the cross streets 1 block north and south. We worked with Aurora PD to place 2 variable message signs for 2 weeks along the corridor, and then gave a golden ticket for a food truck meal to all the property owners surrounding the event. A physical banner was put up on the corridor and the event was announced in the Aurora Water newsletter. This is the preferred alternative that came out of 2 rounds of public engagement, discussion among staff, and an analysis of technical feasibility, and that we presented to the public in the 3rd round. It's a 10-foot wide side path on the south side of 13th Avenue and a 6-foot sidewalk on the north side. On-street parking will remain on one side of 13th Avenue. Of course, it's a long corridor, so these dimensions will vary along the corridor in a context-sensitive way once final design is complete. The preferred alternative isn't a one-size-fits-all, and we've identified where we would need to vary to take into account available right-of-way, adjacent land uses, and need in a context-sensitive manner. Segment between Yosemite and Boston would have 6-foot sidewalks on either side and shared lane shadow markings. This treatment would also mirror what Denver is planning on the other side of Yosemite on 12th Avenue. As we move further east towards Havana, the corridor features steep grades and mature trees, so the landscape buffer next to the shared use path would be reduced. East of Peoria would have a slightly narrower 8-foot side path that's directly next to the street. Parking would be maintained on both sides of the street at schools. Aurora Public Schools was a very close collaborator on this project. East of Sable, the corridor has more right-of-way available, so we'd be able to do a 12-foot wide shared use path with landscape buffer while still maintaining parking on both sides of the street. So with that, does the council support moving the 13th Avenue multimodal corridor study final report with a recommendation to approve to the next available regular meeting of the city council? And I'm
Comments? Questions? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 3C forward? Seeing none, item number 3C will move forward. Thank you very much. Item number 3D, FSIR legislative update, Elizabeth Rogers, Intergovernmental Relations Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So included in the backup are the details of the legislation the FSIR committee has taken positions on from the April 7th meeting. So positions taken include actively support on Senate Bill 23-207, House Bill 23-1259, an official monitor position on Senate Bill 23-249, and a neutral position on House Bill 23-1253. Actively opposed positions were taken on Senate Bill 23-200, House Bill 23-1102, House Bill 23-1245, House Bill 23-1249, House Bill 23-1255, and opposed if asked on Senate Bill 23-201. Also to note in the backup are some additional documents that provide an overview and detail on the amendments that will be sought for Senate Bill 23-213, the land use bill. It will be in committee tomorrow. However, it is action only and no testimony will be taken.
Any questions or comments?
Mayor.
Mayor.
Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you, sir. What was the rationale for taking an opposed position on SB 23-200?
And could you give the title of it, Liz?
The actively opposed on 3,200
Mhm.
or
Yes, ma'am. What was the rationale for taking an opposed position?
um, we didn't look at a bill 23,200. Or do you mean, oh, I'm so sorry. The automated vehicle identification systems bill?
Yes.
Yes,
That's the bill,
I'm
right?
so sorry,
22,200.
Councilmember Marcano. Yes, so the reason the opposed position was taken on that bill is per staff discussion, the legislation as written would be problematic as the city is engaged in the final stages of setting up photo speed enforcement programs. So if this bill would go into effect, the committee would have to kind of redo several ordinances that were put in place to accommodate this pilot program. In addition to that, the bill changes the notice of violation from a 90-day period to a 30-day period. And staff felt like that wasn't enough time for APD staff to kind of review all of the footage and get things out the door for violations to be sent out in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion, questions of staff?
Mayor?
Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, on SB 23-249, we took a monitor position and it's concerning false reporting of an emergency. I guess what was the rationale behind that? It sounds like a good bill. People that would report, a bombing or some terrorist act at a school or whatnot. And we've had some of these emergency, false emergency calls made, and it's really costly to the jurisdiction and to, for our police officers as well as to whatever organization that it impacts.
Yes, Councilmember Bergen. The committee decided that the felony charges were not intense enough for the crime that was being committed, was the rationale from the committee.
Mayor Jurenski.
Councilmember Drinsky.
Yeah, thank you. So on this one, Councilmember Bergen, I actually, I needed more information. That information was provided after our last Pfizer committee meeting. I wanted to know, because it wasn't stated, what the penalty was for a bomb threat. So it's interesting that you actually brought that up too, because that's exactly where I was at. So I wanted to make sure that it aligned. I found out after the meeting, the information was given back to us that it is the same punishment for a bomb threat. I'm happy to, I still think it's, too low of a class felony, but I'm happy to change my position from monitor to support after I was given that information.
Okay. Does the rest of the committee concur or?
Well, I support, but I really want this to come back to the Pfizer so we can do a formal in that committee. But I supported it, based on the information that we have. I know we wanted more information. So I'm saying I support it here, but I do want it to come back to Pfizer just with that protocol.
But the session's almost over. When is Pfizer meeting next?
Well, Mayor, if you want to do it, I support it. Councilmember Jurenski said she supported. Councilmember Zabani.
Is there any objection to supporting? What's the number of the bill again?
249.
Is there any objection to changing our position from what monitor to support for House? Is it Senate?
Senate Bill 20? Yeah,
249. Is there objection? Then we'll move the position to support. Are there further questions or comments?
Mayor, I've been.
Sorry, Councilmember Lawson.
Can I pull Senate Bill 23-201? We took a opposed position, but Jeffrey Moore is going to be testifying on this issue pending on some amendments. I know that there's been some questions on this bill. I also got some questions on this bill from constituents. I wanted Jeffrey Moore to just provide an overview and then the amendments as he's going to be testifying on Thursday. So Jeffrey, would you be able to provide that summary too, so we could discuss this?
Thank you, Councilmember Lawson, and I apologize to correct you, but I did testify last Thursday at the Senate Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. But I'm happy to give an update on my testimony and the thoughts behind the bill if you would still like that.
Councilmember Lawson,
I just would, if you could do so.
please proceed.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to give just very short background on the options for mineral ownership. I think it's really important for the discussion about this bill, which is a mineral bill about forced pooling. If you own minerals, there are three things that you can do with those minerals. First, you could sell them. Second, you could lease them to an operator. And third, you could participate as a financial partner with the operator. Obviously, if you sell, you might get a payment, but you would no longer control the minerals. If you lease, then the operator pays all the costs, takes all the risk, and provides a royalty. If you participate as a financial partner, then you're paying your fair share of the cost depending on your percentage of ownership in the unit. Forced pooling comes in if you don't choose one of those three options to sell, lease, or participate as a financial partner. And if the operator is able to get more than 45% of the total minerals within the drilling and spacing unit leased without your interest, they can apply to have your interest forced pooled. All that means is that you then revert as a working interest owner. You become a financial partner in that well moving forward. There's a penalty to the non-consenting owner, which means that the operator, since they're paying the full cost of the drilling and completion, they're allowed to recover 2 times their cost or 200% of their cost. And then the non-consenting party would come back in from that point forward. They would again pay their cost of operating the well and get any profit if there is. Currently, the only option available for local governments is the first two options, to sell or to lease. State law, including Tabor laws, prohibit local jurisdictions, local governments from participating as a working interest owner, a financial partner in a well. And then, of course, would also prohibit forced pooling, because forced pooling really is just a secondary way to require the mineral owner to participate as a financial partner. In this bill, there are some provisions that apply to all mineral owners equally across the state, and those we express support for. And those are things like requiring the operator to prove with a third party that they have reached that 45% mineral hurdle before they apply for forced pooling. There's a requirement to ask the COGCC, the State Oil and Gas Commission, to determine if the leased minerals can be extracted without including the non-consenting minerals. And if so, the operator must allow the non-consenting party to be excluded from the unit if they desire. It requires the operator to pool minerals before drilling the well. Currently, operators could drill the well first and then apply for forced pooling. This bill would require them to actually make sure that they've done the forced pooling if necessary prior to doing the drilling. So those things we expressed support for because they apply to all mineral owners equally. The bill also recognizes some of the uniqueness of local governments. For example, they may have used public funds to acquire some of their minerals. So the question that I've heard is, well, then why would we oppose the bill that would prohibit forced pooling of local governments and schools? And the reason that we have opposed it as written is that there are some unintended consequences for this particular action in the way the bill is written. When all of us think about a local government in Colorado, we know that's a city or a county. Metro districts and HOAs may be included in some regards. I'm not an expert on that, but definitely we think of like a city. So if we think of the city of Aurora, we could pull up a map on where the city of Aurora is, and we all know that's the jurisdiction, the city limits of the city of Aurora. However, with mineral ownership below the surface, there are no limits on where a local jurisdiction can own minerals. So, for example, the city of Aurora owns mineral interests, and we receive royalties from oil and gas production in Weld County. Those are on properties that were purchased originally by Aurora Water for water rights and other surface operations. But we own oil and gas minerals in Weld County. So the concern here is really about local control because as it's written, it's not defined what a local government is other than what it's defined in state law. So, for example, my concern is that another jurisdiction could come to Aurora. They could purchase a single acre of mineral interest someplace, And then they would have the right to essentially veto the drilling and spacing unit that acre of mineral interest is a part of. I'm fine. The proposal that I've made and testified was that we should limit these rights in the prohibition on forced pooling to only within the jurisdiction's legal boundaries. So, for example, for Aurora, it would be only within the city limits of Aurora and not some other acreage that we might buy somewhere else, and the same for other jurisdictions.
Questions of staff?
Mayor, I just want to make a comment. Thank you, Jeffrey, for that. I mean, I just wanted it to be explained why the committee didn't oppose position on this. I guess I just have one question. When you did testify, were some of your amendments being considered?
Yes, they were. There was an amendment that was given to the committee in the earlier that day, and there was a second amendment that was given just minutes before the committee meeting began. In fact, some of the senators said that they hadn't even seen it yet. The result of that committee hearing on Thursday was they chose to lay over the bill to the next session. I believe that's going to be on Thursday, the 20th. And they will reconsider it at that point. No more testimony, but they'll reconsider it. My assumption is they will be working to combine the amendments together. The First Amendment removed the elements of local government and school districts, the prohibition on being forced pooled, but I'm told that the Second Amendment was supposed to put that back in, but there was some confusion on, since there were two amendments, and how they would work together if they were both adopted. So my understanding is that the committee and the bill sponsors are working to perhaps create a single amendment that would very clearly outline what their proposal was.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. And Mayor, that's all the questions I have and wanted to present for today from this particular Pfizer meeting. So,
Any questions, further questions?
Mayor.
Councilmember Coombs.
So following up on 201, I guess it sounds to me like the majority of the bill we supported. You listed 4 things that we supported and 1 thing that we wanted to amend. So my question is, why was there not an amend position if that was the issue, was just amending for the sake of definitions? Why was it an oppose?
Jeffrey.
Thank you, Councilmember Coombs. That was the direction that we were given at Pfizer. The concern was that if we were to support it, it would appear that we were supporting all the proponents of the bill. There's one additional item that was proposed that we also objected to, and that is currently, as I mentioned, in the forced pooling provision, if a mineral owner is forced pooled, the operator gets to recover 200% of their costs, so 2 times their cost, before the other mineral owner comes back into the project and pays their fair share of cost and recovers any profit, if there is any. The bill also is recommending to reduce that 200% to 100%, so it would only be 1 times instead of 2 times on the recovery. I believe that's not a very strong business practice. I'm not aware of other industries where a minority financial partner would be allowed to not contribute their part of the project and then allow the majority interest financial partner to fund the entire project, and then the minority partner gets a free look at the project and gets to decide if they want to participate in the future if the project's profitable. So just on a pure business perspective, unrelated to oil and gas, I don't understand the reason for that, and it seems like it would cause more confusion and concern in the industry.
Mayor?
Questions? I'm sorry, Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah, can I clarify on that? So it's reducing it to 100%, so they're still paying their portion in that case, right? So that seems to me it's just that you're not getting penalized for refusing forced pooling. And so to me, that seems like that's in the city's interest to support something that prevents us from being penalized by paying twice as much as we otherwise would. Is that not the case? Would the city not benefit by not facing that penalty in instances of potential forced pooling?
I think there's 2 double negatives in that question, but let me address it. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Coombs. So it's not about paying; it's about the cost recovery for the operator. So if there's two partners, let's say the operator owns 60% of the project, and let's just say the city owned 40%, and we were being force pooled, we would not pay anything for the drilling and the completion of the well. The operator would pay, instead of their 60%, they would pay 100% of the cost for drilling and completing the well and operating the well. And then they're allowed to recover from the profit 200% of their cost. And at that point, they reach the 200%, then the city, in this case, example, would come back into the project as a 40% partner. We would pay 40% of the cost and get 40% of the profit, if there is any. However, right now, the city would not be allowed to be in a position of forced pooling because, again, that makes us a financial partner in the well. So we don't have that option. There would be no harm to us currently either way, regardless of what the bill, whether it stays at 200% or moves to 100%, because right now we cannot be force pooled. We can't get into that situation. We have to take a lease if it's provided to us. We negotiate the lease. We do a competitive bid process on the lease so we maximize the income to the city, but we are not allowed to enter into a working interest financial partnership with the operator, either by choice or by force pooling.
Further questions of staff?
Mayor.
Councilmember Combs.
So just on that, it seems to me that the position is taken to not protect the city, but to protect the interests of the oil and gas companies. And I think they have their own lobbyists for that. So I'm not sure that we need to be in the position of also lobbying on their behalf regarding business practices, especially when, again, it seems like there's much to recommend the bill from the city's side. And that's really all I have on that bill. I do have a question about another bill position, if it's okay to.
Let's finish this one.
Can I follow?
Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you. Okay, this is getting a little confusing. I thought Jeffrey said that we didn't necessarily, we liked a lot of the bill, but we didn't like all of it because it took away local control. So we wouldn't want to support something that takes away local control until they address that in the bill with an amendment. Jeffrey?
And so then my question is, why didn't we just amend?
I think Councilmember Bergen has the floor and she asked Mr. Moore a question.
That's correct. On the issue of the prohibition on forced pooling against local governments and school districts, I believe that there's concern and potential unintended consequences in the future of how local jurisdiction is defined in the bill, which currently would allow, as written, would allow a local jurisdiction to acquire mineral interest anywhere in the state, whether it's within their jurisdictional boundary or not. It could be in another city, another county, anywhere else. And then they would essentially have veto power over the drilling and spacing units. And if not full veto power, they would certainly have the ability to, exclude themselves from the drilling and spacing unit. And at that point, there would likely be other private minerals around that local government ownership that could be affected from those decisions that could potentially get into a takings claim.
And then we would possibly be in a situation where we can't have them operate within our operator agreement.
Any well that they drill, that an operator drills that's under an operator agreement would still remain under an operator agreement. Wells that are not in an operator agreement in the future would be under the oil and gas manual and city code. So there's no issue with the operations themselves. It's more about location of drilling and how that might affect the city. It's also not clear if you were to have two local governments that both had mineral ownership in a single drilling and spacing unit, who has control. So if you have one jurisdiction whose council votes for to approve the lease, and you have another one whose votes not to approve a lease and not to enter into the drilling or enter into the unit, it's not clear who has the rights there, or who has control, or what happened in that particular case.
Thank you.
Councilmember Combs.
Mayor, thank you. So again, that all is understandable to me and seems like a reasonable amendment. I'm glad that was pursued. But I do have a question as well about HB 1253. When I had looked at the agenda.
Councilmember Coons, can we just finish this and I'll
Oh,
recognize you?
sure. Yes, sorry. I
Okay.
thought you were recognizing me for the
Okay,
next
is there, so Councilmember Lawson, are you comfortable with the current position?
Mayor, this is how I'm looking at this. At the time at the Pfizer meeting, yes, I'm fine with the current position. However, there will, if these amendments are pursued that Mr. Moore has said, I've asked that this come back to Pfizer. I know it's the end of the session,
Well,
but right now I'm with the position of oppose. But there's some amendments that could happen tomorrow. I
Well-
mean, on Thursday. So
Councilmember Lawson, can we just say, oppose, pending, amendments?
I'll have to see what my committee says. Councilmember Councilmember, or the whole council.
Okay, well, then, with the position will then stand until Pfizer comes back to the committee of the whole then. Because the time is very limited for this session.
I don't know.
Is the session over with on, is it May 5th?
May 6th. May
I'm
6th.
sorry?
May 6th.
May 6th.
I guess maybe get the whole council how they feel about it. I
Is there any objection to keeping the current position right now?
Mayor,
Councilmember Combs.
could I move that we take an amend position so that if these amendments pass, then our lobbyists could support instead of opposing? If that's the only issue.
We can say oppose pending, the amendments that Mr. Moore had mentioned, that are important, I think, to change the character of the bill. Am I correct, Mr. Moore?
So,
Correct.
Mayor, can I just ask Mr. Moore a question? If we stay with that position, and I want you to be very frank with me about it, if we go with this position, it's pending these amendments that you said. If we get these amendments, then you would be fine with this bill?
I would be fine with the bill if the amendments clarified that the prohibition on local government force pooling is limited to the jurisdictional boundaries of that local government. So the city or the county, whatever the local government is, that it's limited to inside that jurisdictional boundary. And I think all local governments should have that control. And their own commission and council can make the decisions that's best for their local government. But yes, I would be fine if it was limited to just the jurisdictional boundaries of that local government.
Okay.
Mayor, Zavonic, real quick.
Councilmember
Yeah, I just want to make sure because I remember there was another part, Jeffrey, correct me if I'm wrong, that dealt with the ability for the local government within its boundaries to, with a very small stake, enforce pooling. We could have had maybe 15% or 10% of the mineral rights and still been able to stop the project from going forward, even if there was the 40% or whatever the threshold is for force pooling. Am I remembering that correctly?
I believe so. The concern is that if a local government can object or take their mineral acreage out of a unit, essentially, then that prohibits the unit from being drilled in some form. It could be rearranged or reorganized, but it's going to depend on the specifics of that individual situation. It depends on how much acreage the local government has. It's going to depend on where that acreage is within the unit itself, and the drilling locations that are available to the operator. So there may not be another way to access all of the minerals or the other minerals that are in agreement with drilling inside that proposed DSU in every case.
Mayor, this is why we took an opposed position, because there was a lot of pieces of this bill that we didn't like. And so as it stands today, it's not a bill that we should support, and we support it on the committee. That doesn't mean we can't work towards amendments. We can continue to work towards it. And I think of an amend position as something that we're okay with, but we'd like it to be better. In this case, it's a terrible bill and it needs to be fixed. If they fix it, great, but there's a lot that they have to fix before we get to a support position. At least I would think.
Mr. Moore, Councilmember Zavonic raised the second issue.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Councilmember Zavonic, I think, raised the second issue that was discussed in Pfizer, and why they chose to oppose the bill. So it's not just Can you address that second issue that Councilmember Zavonic just raised? Because that's separate from I think that's separate from the jurisdictional issue that you raised.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Zavonic, I apologize. Could you repeat that second part of your question?
Yeah, no, I think you did. So the first part was if you had a local government that owned land or rights within another jurisdiction. So that was one. The second one was that if we had a small amount of mineral rights within our own city and we decided not to, we could not be force pulled, even if 80% of all the other mineral rights or mineral owners around us chose to move forward. This bill would allow the local government to pull out, which could make the project economically unfeasible. Is that correct, Jeffrey? Did I state that right? And we objected to that part too, because the city, I believe, if we have, if 80% or 90%, some large number mineral owners decide they want to move forward, I don't believe that the local government should be able to completely stop the project from moving forward, which this bill would allow it to.
That is correct.
Mayor.
It would.
So Mayor, can I,
Hold on. So, Mr. Moore, then are you saying that from your perspective, there are two amendments would be required to provide support for the bill on these issues that were raised in the Pfizer committee?
I believe that's correct. Certainly limiting the definition of local government to its jurisdictional boundary would be the first clear amendment. The other is the local governments, and I have to remember how the bill is written. I'm not sure if it's just local governments and school districts or if it's anyone, but there is the opportunity for any non-consenting owner to be out of the bill. I'm not necessarily opposed to that per se, but definitely on the local government side.
Okay, Councilmember Lawson.
Mayor.
okay, so I just asked Jeffrey about if these amendments, so I guess, Mayor, you have two questions. Are we just gonna oppose or we're gonna do oppose pending amendments? So I guess those are the two questions before us.
I think that right now, I think on the floor, I think it was the Councilmember Coombs that raised the issue of opposed, but support pending amendment.
Completely amend. And that's three different things.
Okay, Councilmember Coombs, what was your proposal?
Yeah, so it was to take an amend position so that we could, for example, move to support if the amendments were in place. It sounds like Mr. Moore does not object to the ability of an entity to be excluded from pooling, but maybe the committee does. So I think that's an issue that I didn't have clarity on. It seems to me that, as it was stated, it's if the project is still feasible without that entity being pooled, that they could be removed from pooling. And I think that would be to the benefit of the city and actually to the operator, from what it seems to me, because we could say, no, actually, we don't want to sell these minerals or lease these minerals. And the operator could still move forward with us saying no, without us getting forced pooled. So that to me seems like it gives us more options. We've been in situations where we have no options related to potential mineral leases as a result of potentially being force pooled, which we're not allowed to do. So it seems to me in the interest of the city to have that flexibility in those options. That being said, it sounds like the committee didn't agree and wants to oppose the city having that flexibility for the sake of the economic feasibility for the operator. And that's a choice the committee can make, but I would still recommend an amend position so that if the amendment around local control was made, we could still come to a support position on the bill.
Councilmember Coombs, would you consider with your proposal
Can I get clarification? I'm sorry.
would you consider giving discretion to Mr. Moore as to what shape of the bill that it could take? Because we don't know what amendments are going to be added on that might be additional that if it were to go through Pfizer, that there would be opposition. Would you say could you leave amend general and give discretion then to Mr. Moore in your proposal?
I would be okay with that. I don't know if the committee's okay with that.
Is there opposition? Is there opposition to doing that? Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, this is getting really confusing because there's three things I heard, because I think you also mentioned the cost, the recouping of the 2 times versus the 1-time cost. I don't mind if we were to amend, but I don't think we're ready to amend. I think it's right now it's opposed unless the amendments that Jeffrey thinks are suitable work, but the committee could take a totally different amendment. That is not what we want.
Councilmember Bergen, we took an oppose if asked. However, we didn't do oppose if asked for amendments at the committee.
The committee of the whole can change the decision made by Pfizer. And so, is there opposition to oppose, unless amended, and give Mr. Moore the discretion to determine the shape of the bill as amended that the city could support? Is there opposition to doing that? By seeing none, then that's what we'll do. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Number 5A, Regional Resolution RTD R line 2023. Councilmember
I'm sorry, Mayor. I apologize. I did have one other bill that I wanted to.
I'm sorry. I stand corrected. Councilmember Coombs.
Sorry. And thank you for the opportunity here. So I just was wondering about HB 23-1253. When I looked at the agenda, it looked like it was a support if asked position, and now it's a neutral position. And I've had constituents contact me about public safety issues created by vacant housing owned by corporations and investors, about poor management issues with respect to anything from landscaping to internal condition of the housing of these corporately owned homes, and also about the potential impact to housing costs of the amount of housing that's owned by corporate entities. So these are all things that are constituent issues that I've heard, and I'm wondering why we wouldn't support having a study that helps us to have more information about those issues, which could also enable us as a local government to take up action in relation to those issues.
Mayor.
Councilmember Lawson.
So at the Pfizer committee, Councilmember Coombs, I took a support position. However, I got overturned with the neutral position. So I do support this as a task force because I do think that this issue needs to be addressed. And it's part of the reason why we have a rising housing cost. So I can just speak I just wanted to make sure that that's mentioned, but it was over the committee. So that's why maybe we need to look at it as a whole then.
Okay, further discussion?
Mayor.
Marcano. Councilmember Marcano.
Yes, thank you, sir. Yes, I also would support support position on this. This is an issue that I've heard a tremendous amount about from my own constituents. And actually, Councilmember Coombs and I wanted to look into this issue a little further a couple of years ago, but we were basically told that we didn't have the resources as a city to conduct this kind of analysis. So having the state do this for the whole state, I think would be really beneficial, would allow us to better understand how the market is being adversely impacted by consolidation of ownership, and hopefully give Coloradans and Aurorans a leg up in the future in being able to attain housing.
Further discussion?
Mayor.
Councilmember Jaworski.
Yeah, I just want to say also too, like one big reason that the market is being impacted is because of the current interest rates. I mean, it can't all just be blamed on corporations buying housing. There our interest rates are pretty terrible right now.
Further discussion? Is there, let's see, is there objection to taking a support position? Is that, I think,
Mayor?
Councilmember Lawson, is that what you are putting forward?
Mayor, I'm speaking for myself because this is just forming a task force, which I think is a good evaluation. So it's just a task force. So I supported it at the Pfizer committee and I continue to support.
Councilmember Bergen.
Does anyone know what that task force entailed in terms of details?
I mean, I don't have the bill on me, Councilmember Bergen, so I don't have the bill right in front of me.
Does Liz have it? I mean, task force sounds okay.
Liz, can you comment, Liz Rogers?
Yes. So the task force would be composed of several different entities, as well as have the potential to affect different legislation moving forward. One of those include the creation of a fee imposed on a corporation that owns a significant number of homes, what types or what that constitutes as, and then eligibility requirements for organizations and programs that may apply for grants for for housing as well. If you would like, I could detail more information on the composition of the task force, if you would like.
Yeah, I'd like to know the composition, if that includes, someone from each city, and then the task force would not have any authority, correct? Just a report?
So yes, the task force does not have any authority, nor is there any authority in this legislation to impose fees. It's only a potential outcome of what the task force could recommend. The task force would be composed of 8 members, which would include the Speaker of the Speaker of the House of Representatives would appoint a member from the House of Representatives, a member who has significant professional experience as a real estate agent, a member who has significant professional experience with labor and workforce, and then the President of the Senate shall appoint a member of the Senate, someone who has professional work as a mortgage broker, and someone who has experience advocating for housing rights. And then DOLA will appoint a representative for their division as well. And the Secretary of State would also be able to appoint a member who has experience as a county clerk.
Yeah, I see it now in the chat. Okay,
Thank you, whoever did that.
Okay, further discussion? Seeing none, is there, I guess the request is to move from neutral to support. Is there objection to moving from neutral to support?
I object, Zavonic.
I object to Jurenski.
Further objection? Further objection?
Gardner.
Okay.
And I object. We're still monitor, right?
Neutral,
Or
Neutral.
neutral,
but not
we're
even monitored.
but we're not opposed.
Is there any further objections? Very well. Then it will move forward. Are there any other issues?
Mayor, that is it for Pfizer.
Any other issues for Pfizer?
Wait, Mayor, so can I clarify, Jurenski, can I clarify on that last one, what was your vote? Because it was a tie.
I support it going forward. Further discussion on legislation? Seeing none. Is there any objection to moving 3D forward? Seeing none, 3D will move forward. 5A resolution regarding RTD R line 2023.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. So this resolution is pretty self-explanatory here. The idea is to support RTD reevaluating the maintenance schedule for the R line to bring it more in line with the H line. For those of you who might not be aware, the R line is going to be experiencing daytime service disruptions from the beginning of this month through October, while the H line is going to only experience overnight delays. We've heard from constituents and city staff about how this is negatively impacting their commute, their lives, and frankly making it less likely that they use RTD in the future. We want to be encouraging more ridership, not less, and I think that it's in the city's best interest to do that as well. And the second portion of the resolution ties into that point and just asks RTD to also restore the shorter headways between trips here. Our ridership on the R line, despite COVID, despite economic downturns, has been resilient, but the long headways between trains discourages ridership. So it has an adverse economic impact on us as well, and contributes to our congestion issues here locally. So that is the short version of the resolution, and I would hope and ask for everyone's support.
Questions of the sponsor?
I'm sorry?
Questions of the sponsor? Is there an objection to moving item number 5A forward? Seeing none, item number 5A will move forward. Seeing no further business before the study session of the Aurora City Council, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.